Wetlands have played a critical role for millennia in the lives of people in Africa. Whether these be small seasonally flooded areas, permanent swamps or floodplains, they all make particular contributions to the well-being of people. Wetlands are used for a variety of livelihood purposes, including the collection of water, fishing, grazing of livestock, collection of wild plants and seasonal cultivation. These benefits contribute to the health and well-being of communities across much of rural Africa and also reach the urban areas. In recent decades, as a result of population growth and the degradation of long-farmed upland fields, wetlands have attracted more attention for cultivation. This has been especially so in countries such as Zambia and Malawi, which have suffered several droughts in recent decades. For rural households who are short of food, wetlands often offer good soils as well as water for irrigation, so that cultivation can take place in the dry season. These additional crops help overcome food shortages caused by poor rain-fed harvests from the uplands. In this way, wetlands can provide a safety net for poor households struggling to survive and help reduce their vulnerability. In recent years, wetlands have also been identified as a valuable resource by economically successful rural households. These families are increasingly using wetlands for irrigated vegetable farming to supply local markets. For these better-off households, wetlands are a development resource which can increase their incomes, as well as generate funds to invest in new enterprises, such as rearing chickens and pigs or running a business. Besides these spontaneous responses, farmers are being encouraged by many African governments to use wetlands to improve national food security and reduce food imports. As part of the government responses, but also as a response by NGOs, treadle pumps along with seed and fertilizer packages have been distributed for dry season farming in wetlands. However, wetlands are fragile ecosystems. They can be altered in ways which are almost irreversible so that they become drylands. In such cases, the economic benefits which they can produce are greatly reduced, and wider environmental services, which control river flooding and help rivers flow all year, are undermined. Given these risks and the growing pressures on wetlands, the key challenge is to develop the correct management techniques for sustainable use. Recognizing this critical situation, Wetland Action approached the Wetlands and Poverty Reduction Programme of Wetlands International to fund work with communities in Zambia and Malawi to explore how best to strike a balance between livelihood development and environmental service provision in seasonal wetlands or Dambos. The project is implemented by 2 local NGOs. In Mapika district of Northern Province, Zambia, the local partner is North Luangwa Wildlife Conservation and Community Development Programme, while in the Simlemba area of Kasungu district in Central Province, Malawi, the partner is Maleza, the Malawi Enterprise Zones Association. These local NGOs are supported by the country offices of the European charity Self-Help Africa. The project builds on farmers' knowledge of the environmental processes in the wetlands and their surrounding catchments. Work started with extensive field visits and discussions with farmers, exploring their local knowledge about how wetlands work and the key challenges in managing them. The farmers have a deep understanding of the seasonal variations in wetlands and were concerned about sustaining their use for themselves and their children. Farmers were clearly aware of the links between the catchments and the wetlands. They had noticed sediment coming from the uplands into the wetlands, and they realized that the dry season water flow into the wetlands was better where there is more vegetation cover in the adjoining catchment. The farmers identified two major challenges for sustaining Dambo use. One was upland degradation and reduced infiltration into the catchment, which can store water for the wetland. The second was drainage and down-cutting, which lowers the water table too much. In a healthy state, the natural forest vegetation and well-managed farmland on the uplands surrounding the Dambos ensure that there is good water infiltration during the rainy season and plenty of water stored in the uplands. This water is released slowly to the wetlands during the dry season so that they have enough moisture throughout the year to allow grazing and cultivation and to maintain springs and wells. However, deforestation of the uplands and poorly managed agriculture in those areas can lead to reduced infiltration, rapid runoff of rainfall, and erosion. Instead of water being stored in the catchment during the rainy season, rainfall runs off rapidly down the slopes into the wetlands. Coarse sediments are washed into the wetland, covering the good soil at the edges of the wetland and even filling the shallow wells. As a result, little water is stored in the catchment, which can percolate slowly to the wetland in the dry season. Consequently, the water table is not maintained near to the surface, and so is not available for use in the dry season. This means that the once almost permanently wet Dambos turn into dry lands during the dry season. Drainage of wetlands can be a temporary measure during the wettest time of the year to prevent waterlogging and allow crops to grow. However, if drains are too deep, they may lower the water table too much, so the wetland becomes too dry for cropping in the dry season. There is always a danger that the drains may encourage natural processes of downcutting and erosion in wetlands, and so lead to the formation of gullies. These can lower the water table permanently. In such cases, wetlands become too dry for cultivation, while they stop providing wetland services such as flood moderation and the recharge of groundwater for wells. Farmers recognize that these negative developments in Dambos are driven in part by deforestation of the catchments and poor upland farming with few soil and water conservation measures. Deforestation is largely caused by clearance for new fields as well as for domestic fuel wood, while in Malawi there are additional demands from the tobacco industry. Other problems with land use in the Dambos were also identified. These include cultivation in the centre of the Dambo, where gullies could be formed by fast-moving floodwater, the cultivation of water-hungry plants, such as sugarcane and eucalyptus trees, and the poor management of water from treadle pumps. These discussions with farmers identified 4 key concepts which the project has used in its work in both Zambia and Malawi. Functional landscapes, linking catchments and wetlands, and adjusting land used to replicate natural conditions where possible. Valuing wetlands, increasing the value of wetlands so that they and their catchments are managed well without the need for specific funding grants. Village Natural Resource Management Committees, coordinating participatory land use planning in the wetlands and catchments to maximize economic and environmental benefits. And striking a balance between livelihood development in wetlands and measures to sustain environmental functioning. The key features of the functional landscape approach and the associated land use planning and development which it proposes are shown in this diagram. The work in Malawi can be divided into 2. That in the uplands and that in the wetlands. The upland activities are outlined starting from the highest areas. The hills and rocky outcrops, followed by the main rain-fed farm fields and ending at the buffer zone bordering the wetland edge. In order to improve infiltration of rainfall, which has positive effects on the wetlands water supply, and to reduce runoff and erosion, which generally have negative effects on the wetlands, afforestation of the upper slopes is being undertaken. Other afforestation occurs nearer to villages and homestead where woodlots are planted. These reduce the removal of natural vegetation for fuel wood or building poles. In most cases, indigenous species are used. These are raised in nurseries located near to wetland water sources. Contour ridges can help reduce runoff and encourage infiltration of rainfall. The alignment of ridges along the contours is critical. Marker ridges every 10 or 20 meters provide guidance for all ridges. These ridges not only improve infiltration and hence water availability for the field crops, but also improve the deep infiltration of water, which appears months or years later in the wetlands and shallow wells. Use of organic compost is encouraged in order to improve crop yields and reduce reliance on chemical fertilizer. However, there are other benefits as it improves water infiltration into the soil and also storage of water in the soil nearer to the roots to the crops, thereby helping them overcome drought. Planting agroforestry trees and shrubs in the upland fields is encouraged, especially leguminous varieties. Such trees and shrubs help stabilize the soil and reduce erosion risks. They also improve soil fertility from leaf litter and nitrogen fixing. At the lower edge of the uplands, as they slope down to the wetlands, farmers are being encouraged to establish a zone of natural vegetation in order to avoid sediment and runoff reaching the wetlands. The natural vegetation encouraged to grow in this zone is protected by fire breaks. The project communities have developed their own land use plans to help them see how the various activities above are linked and contribute to integrated wetland and catchment management. This is an interactive process and all the community engage in it. In the wetland, one of the critical issues is the protection of the wetland centre from cultivation. In this area, natural vegetation should be maintained as it helps stop erosion and gully formation. Other areas of natural vegetation across the wetland may be developed to help reduce flood surges, reduce the speed of water flow, control erosion and enhance infiltration. Wells, whether for domestic water or for irrigation, should not be in the centre of the wetland as they can become focal points for gully formation. It is preferable if they are nearer the wetland edge, even if this means they have to be a metre or so deeper. Ensuring the domestic water supply in the wells, which rely on the recharge of wetlands, helps increase the value which communities see in wetlands. This encourages sound management of these areas and their catchments. To reduce the risks of erosion of wetland soils caused by cultivation, these areas should be restricted to small plots or beds surrounded by more extensive areas of natural vegetation. As much as possible use of wetlands for cultivation should be adjusted to the natural conditions. During the early part of the dry season, when the water table is high, beds for cultivation should be slightly raised to avoid waterlogging. In the late dry season, they should be depressed below the surface to improve access to groundwater and facilitate efficient use of irrigation water. Plants should be spaced according to the recommendations for the different varieties so that good quality crops are produced. Increasing the value of crops marketed from wetlands encourages good management of these areas. Water should be regarded as a scarce resource and used with care. Water from treadle pumps should be used only on the cultivated crops and not be wasted by spraying it onto paths and other areas. The overall result of these measures is to create a landscape as shown. This will help ensure the sustainable use of the wetlands for economic and environmental benefits, as well as improving upland cropping. In northern Zambia, there are extensive dambos which cover many thousands of square kilometers. They are known as sour Dambos because of their acidic soils, which are caused by the heavy rainfall in this area. However, there is a tradition of using these Dambos for very limited cultivation after poor rainy seasons when upland crops have failed. Building on that tradition, staff in the North Luangwa Wildlife Conservation and Community Development Programme have developed an improved way of using the Dambos in all years and even during the rainy season, when normally pests and fungus can be a serious problem. This enhanced technique involves cutting thin turfs and drying them face down during the early dry season. Keeping the plot covered in this way helps reduce moisture loss. Once dried, the turfs are piled into ridges and burned between July and August. The resulting pile of soil and ash is mounded up and seedlings transplanted into them, or seeds sown, a few weeks after burning. The key feature is the way the ash from the burnt grass and roots attracts moisture from the wet surface of the Dambo up into the ridge. This means that virtually no watering is needed, even in the hottest time of year. The ash is also important as it neutralizes the acidity, thereby releasing nutrients. It also acts as a fertilizer in its own right. In this way, the farmers are able to grow crop combinations for a year or more before fallowing the land. Environmental practices essential for ensuring the long-term sustainability of wetland cultivation have been identified. Sites must be selected with care, as they should have plenty of groundwater flowing into the Dambo. The presence of this water is indicated by a short grass rather than the tall grass found in drier parts of the wetlands. This groundwater flow into the Dambo in the dry season occurs downslope from upland areas with good natural vegetation. It is not found where there are cultivation sites or chitamine fields, upslope of the wetland in the adjoining forest. Hence, a key aim of the project is to reverse deforestation and cultivation around the Dambos for at least 50 metres upslope. This also involves discouraging late burning in these areas to help the natural vegetation regenerate. Other techniques of environmental management are similar to ones in Malawi and include keeping cultivation away from the middle of the Dambo. Critical to the management of catchment and wetlands to achieve a functional landscape is community coordination. Village Natural Resource Management Committees are one way in which this may be achieved. Through such institutions and the plans they develop, it is possible to ensure that individuals use land wisely. Activities they engage in include land use planning, with the designation of protection zones around wetlands and in the core of these areas, afforestation of degraded uplands, reduction of sugarcane and eucalyptus in wetlands, and the better management of treadle pump water. The experience from the Striking a Balance project shows that the seasonal wetlands are extremely important for the livelihoods of rural communities. They can help people survive famine years and hungry seasons, while they can also support the better-off farmers in developing their livelihood enterprises. The project has also shown that, despite being fragile and liable to degradation, wetlands can be used sustainably both to generate livelihood benefits and maintain environmental functions. Utilization of wetlands does not lead to their degradation, provided that the functional landscape approach is understood and applied. Indeed, the Striking a Balance project has shown that the functional landscape approach can help enhance the livelihood benefits from wetlands, and even those from the uplands, as well as maintaining the environmental services of these areas. Further, the project has shown that communities become more enthusiastic about environmental management and rehabilitation activities through their village natural resource management committees as the value of benefits from wetlands increases. The project has identified 4 key challenges to address in furthering the success of its activities. These are scaling up the functional landscape approach, so that whole valleys and catchments are all managed with the same principles of this project, rather than just isolated areas belonging to individual villages. Increasing and diversifying wetland-based incomes through fish ponds, beekeeping crafts and improved market linkages so as to enhance the value gained from wetlands. Managing land use pressures as vegetable production and other enterprises based on wetlands grow so as to maintain a balance of land uses and to avoid the collapse of wetland functioning and production. And building sustainable institutions, such as village natural resource management committees, to enhance community understanding and coordination of land use. With these challenges recognised and the positive experience from the field activities, the Striking a Balance project is now sharing its experience with other NGOs and government agencies in Zambia and Malawi. This work will be extended into those parts of Africa where wetlands are important for food security, poverty reduction and environmental stability. To this end, training in the Southern Africa Development Community has been started, while linkages with the Food Security Unit in the Common Market for East and Southern Africa are being developed. Wetlands are fragile resources, but they cannot be ignored in the struggle to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. Rather than being seen as resources to plunder or biodiversity hotspots to conserve, a balance has to be struck, ensuring long-term sustainable use for both livelihoods and the maintenance of environmental functioning.